Let's get it started. Good evening. Welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting, our 17th of fiscal 2025 on February 3rd at 7 p.m. here in Memorial Hall and Town Hall. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location in the posted agenda, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the link in the posted agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28, Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their kind assistance. Okay, first up tonight, we have two members of the Affordable Housing Trust to give us an update on Affordable Housing Trust activities and their warrant article at town meeting this year. So, invite Ed in.
Hey, I'm Ed Bain. I'm chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, 5 Thomas Rice Drive.
Alan Edinburgh, 8 Nash Street. I'm a trustee on the Affordable Housing Trust. I am the select board's representative.
So I'm going to let Alan take it since he's prepared a lot of this.
So thank you for having us this evening. We always appreciate the opportunity to update your committee and the community at large about the activities of the trust. I won't go through it all, but a reminder of our mission about improving housing affordability within the community of Westborough, and a set of guiding principles that, as we were formed based on feedback from the community, that we use to weigh our decisions, our strategic planning, and the execution of our projects and programs. Before I get into all the projects and programs, I thought it'd be good to give a snapshot of where we are. I figured the finance committee would love to know about our finances.
Hey.
And so currently, from an asset standpoint, between our cash balance and properties that we currently own, our total asset is about $3.586 million. And there's two numbers beneath that. The oversight rules say at this point that would mean if we have any project where we would be committing more than the $1.793 million, we would need select board approval. Or if our total commitments at this point totaled more than $2.869 million, we would also have to go to the select board for oversight approval before committing any other funds. And those thresholds are there to provide a check and balance and oversight for long-term solvency. So now we look at what we're committed and encumbered to, which is a number of projects, and we'll dive into detail. 3 Baylor Avenues, a single-family home that's been taken down and being rebuilt. Our current commitment there is, outstanding commitment there is $192,000. We expect we'll get the $20,000 in escrow back. That relates to a poorly documented cleanup of an oil spill on the property from 2004. And the developer's construction lender was concerned even after we drilled, had time bond drill soil samples. They're still worried about any potential residual cleanup. And the estimate is that escrow would be more than enough to cover any residual soil removal or relocation on the property that might be necessary. HB Cottages is the name we've given for now for our project that combines 6 Beach Street and 45 High Street Extension. Our current commitment is only related to site prep work and doing some of the legwork so we can have a more robust RFP go out this spring to see what our development options and development costs would be. At that point, we'll have a better sense of state and federal potentially funding sources, as well as what subsidy the trust might contribute to that project. And we'll get into the details of these. We have 2 subsidy projects. I misspelled subsidy. I apologize for that. 1830 Lyman Street and 25 Connector Road. In effect, we're providing affordable housing subsidies. Both of these projects are increasing their affordable housing component from the 20% required under the zoning at the time of their permitting to 25%. As these are both rental properties, we'll show you that it has a significant impact on our SHI inventory with the state and provides us a level of protection and control, we believe, potentially through the 2050 census. We have some other programs running. Yeah, it does that. There's a microphone here that buzzes occasionally.
Oh, every once in a while, just to wake us up or something?
Yeah, just to wake you up.
Okay.
It's like the dead man switch on the freight train.
I think we all checked
Keep it going.
Very
We have
good.
some other programs running, including our Homeborough program, which we're working on the legal aspects to launch it. That's a down payment assistance program. And WRAP, which is the Westborough Rental Assistance Program, which is up and running, and I've got end of January numbers for that we'll share. So currently, we've totally committed or encumbered a little over 1.62 million, almost 1.63 million, which leaves us available assets of 1,957,000. Now, as we go through the HB Cottages program, we will be the two properties I mentioned will no longer be assets. So as we do our planning, we base our planning and the ratios off that 2.759 million number, the cash balance. So when we look at that, we really don't have 2.86 million in room. We've got less than that. We realize that as we look ahead at other opportunities and other projects where we might commit funds. So into the projects, you have a before picture and a rendering of what the after looked like. We don't believe the home is going to be yellow. It will be a different color. It is the redevelopment of a single family home. The permitting is near completion with construction. We hope will should start as the ground thaws this spring. They've actually dug the trenches now for the foundation. So that just needs to be formed and poured and get things started. The investment is the acquisition of the property, which was done during COVID. The trust, rather than just asking for a transfer of the property, we paid the back taxes on it. And then we have to do some land prep, including no small amount of asbestos removal. And again, follow up from this 2004 heating oil spill of 150 gallons that was cleaned up. Our maximum subsidy for this project, which the subsidy will depend on how EOHLC prices the property and current interest rates at the time the property goes up for sale, but our maximum subsidy at that point in time would be $172. Currently, this home, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,450 square foot home approximately, will sell for about $230,000.
And that's at current mortgage rates.
And that's at current mortgage rates. That neighborhood, similar sized homes are in the low 400s to 430, 440, depending on some of the amenities they have. And so this will definitely be an advantageous opportunity for families that qualify. This is an 80% AMI project as well. HB Cottages, as I mentioned, combines 6 Beach Street and 45 High Street extension. We're doing that to get economy of scale on the bid. There's some concept maps of where we might place the homes. We're looking at approximately 10 new cottage style homes, maybe a mix of single family home and some townhome style duplexes, depending on how the final engineering works. Currently, we're doing site analysis work and working to build project consensus with the goal of having the RFP go out later this spring. When we talk about site prep work, for example, 45 High Street used to be a gravel pit. And so we've had test holes dug in case we need to do septic, but also to get a sense of what was in the pit that's now covered with dirt and trees, to see if there's any blasting or other issues that might come up. Also, there's 45 High Street in the center, there's 300 square feet of wetlands. We believe we've located 1,500 feet to replace and replenish that's actually connected to existing wetlands, which is preferred. So our goal is to go through, not only work with the planning board, because this is a friendly 40B, we'd like their support when we go to the ZBA, but also through conservation to give us, the box in which we can build, knowing that the developer will still have to go back for specific orders of condition, things of that nature. Because we purchased the 6 Beach Street property from a via bankruptcy, closed bid bankruptcy auction, our acquisition land prep for the 2 properties is about $550,000 is where we expect it'll cap out before we go out to bid. And again, the subsidy will be to be determined. We're already in contact with advocates at the state. Currently, Mass Housing's preference is not to get involved in any project below 30 to 35 affordable units. At 10 units, we're below that. Our delegation took a tour of the properties. They're aware. They've agreed to support us going after grants and funding.
And that was
For
both of
this
our
from the state.
senators and reps, either
Yes.
Our reps or representative of our reps. One of the biggest challenges we have for both of these properties, if we're putting up multiple units there, is the sewer moratorium.
Right.
So we're looking forward to get some, hopefully, clearance or a better view of that by beginning of the first quarter, second quarter.
We are working with DPW. We're going to officially request a conditional waiver, knowing that given the timing of when these would go out to bid, then permitting construction would not happen until sometime in 2026, the spring of 2026. We're hoping that we can get something to put in the RFP that says, if the moratorium is lifted by then, we will have the permits. So that anything we can do ahead of time of the RFP that reduces the risk to the developer significantly lowers the cost of the project. And that's our strategy. You may have seen some coverage in the Community Advocate about the Westborough Rental Assistance Program. This was launched mid-January, where we started, early January, we started accepting applications and providing the grants. This is a 2-pronged program, both housing stabilization assistance and rent increase mitigation. Housing stabilization is someone who qualifies financially at our income eligibility levels, has an unexpected event, a loss of job, a job change, underemployment. They're either behind in their rent or they're going to be unable to make rent. We will provide up to 2 months of rental assistance to get them through that. So these are families that could otherwise afford to be in the unit but have an unforeseen circumstance. We will also provide that stabilization to families that have applied for state rental assistance. The state programs are much larger, have more funds, have a longer continuity of care, if you will. However, right now, the RAFT program decisions are taking 60 to 75 days. And so if we can keep someone from getting evicted until the state approves their application, we've done a good deed. Eligibility is for folks who are below the 80% AMI level for our community, and they're extremely burdened, meaning their rent utilities is more than 50% of their household income, or they're burdened at that 30% burden level due to unemployment or other atypical financial issues. And as I mentioned, we've got the stabilization. We also have rent increase mitigation. If someone's facing a rent increase that sort of puts them into that eligibility ranking, we will provide up to $500 a month rental assistance for 4 months to help fill that rental gap, giving them time to either renegotiate with the landlord, sometimes there's legal action they can take to protect themselves, or to find alternate housing, which is quite a challenge in and of itself. This is a pilot program that the trust funded. We have started actively looking for other grants, governmental and nonprofit grants, to continue the program should we desire to do so. Basic numbers, administration is what we're paying Metro West Collaborative Development to run the program and provide the confidentiality and the compliance for us, as well as some overhead costs for us as far as publishing materials and legal fees and all that fun stuff. There's a $120,000 minimum that is allocated to go to this direct assistance. As of the end of January, we have 24 households. So
within a couple weeks.
Within a little over 2 weeks, 10 grants have been issued. Those applicant households represent 63 total people, the majority of which are children. So far, those 10 grants represent a little over $39,000. Now, we expect the rate of applications will decrease, that there was some pent-up demand, and so we're continuing to monitor it, but we are, and now we're speaking today about potential sources of funding
grants
to keep the program going after the
third
pilot,
parties.
if the need is still there. And with those 10 families, we have prevented, I know of 8 of the 10, we've prevented the landlord from filing notices to quit and starting eviction processes. So we've kept definitively 8 families in their home.
And we work
And
very
one group
closely
at a time.
with Youth and Family Services in this, because very often these people will.
Julie O'Neill Welch is doing an amazing job with outreach.
Amazing job.
And helping, not only helping the families, but coming back to us as the trust and to Metro West with issues and challenges that the families were having with the application process. Because of that, we've modified the program slightly. We simplified the application process. It's the balance between preventing fraud and protecting the financial interest of the trust, as well as what's manageable and reasonable for the families. And so things like you must have printed bank statements was in the rules. Some of these families don't have bank accounts. They live through Venmo or Cash App. And so what documentation do you need from those services? And then even the logistics of getting, files that can be uploaded, which is hard to do from a phone. So going through the computer systems at the library to get things printed or downloaded into PDF so they can be uploaded have been challenging. Julia's been amazing at that. And Julia's brought in the outreach workers from the senior center, so they're aware of the program, as well as the staff and volunteers at the food pantry understand when to refer someone to the program as well. Our next program is still in the launch phase. This is taking painfully longer than we hoped it would. It is a down payment assistance program. It's designed for first-time homebuyers who are residents of Westborough, looking to move from rental to ownership. It's also open to senior, veterans, and disabled, and town employees. Town employees do not need to be current Westborough residents to apply. It's an exception to the residency rule. Eligibility, people making up to 80% AMI, as well as up to 120% AMI. We have different types of assistance. Each assistance grant is up to $30,000. That's based on their financial need and the value of the property the home they're looking to buy. So the intent of this program, it can help people get into buy an affordable home if they don't yet have the full 5% down payment that's typically required. If people are below 80% AMI, that our assistance can be a grant in that regard. If they're below 100% AMI, it is a deferred payment loan, 0% interest, 0 payments, that forgives over time. So if they stay in the home a full 10 years, the loan's been forgiven. And so there's a small forgiveness each year starting at the end of year 2. We do that rather than a bulk forgiveness because that forgiveness is a taxable income event, and you don't want to create a tax liability or knock people out of other assistance programs that they might be taking advantage of. For people who are in the moderate income category, between 100 and 120% AMI, it's a deferred payment loan. So it's a 0 interest, 0 payment loan that's due on any sale or transfer of the property. The loan subordinates to a primary mortgage, to a HELOC, and will automatically subordinate to the property being used for a federal or state business loan program. So if someone's starting a business and they get a 7A loan from the SBA, we will subordinate to that loan guarantee.
It protects basically their credit, by subordinating the loan at the end of all the other obligations.
And while this can be used for people to get into affordable housing, it's also there to help bridge the gap for people who can afford the monthly payment but can't afford to enter a market rate home. And so this is where we're sort of fixing, Westborough, as many communities, has a missing middle of moderate income price properties at this point in time. So this is a chance when those become available to help people get into them or, step up. We do not exclude our buyers from also taking advantage of other down payment assistance programs. So if they qualify for the program for mass housing, it may adjust the size of our grant, but it doesn't disqualify from that. This is also a pilot program. The assistance level is 150,000, so up, 5, potentially more households. And right now we're completing the development of the paperwork, which is basically at this point the loan, mortgage, and lien agreements.
Because they have to sign basically a loan document.
Yeah, it's technically a mortgage, the way it's written, and we just want to make sure as we become a lender that our ducks in a row. Metro West Development Corporation will also be managing this program. One of the reasons for choosing an outside manager, there are communities that run it in-house. The challenge, however, is that eventually anything in this program that's confidential would become public record. And so by having Metro West Collaborative Development administer the program, we can keep the family's financial information confidential. We don't have to worry about it, Freedom of Information Act challenges and things of that nature for people's personal information. And so we're hoping to get this off the ground in March and April. Town employees are eligible for the program. It is important, I will point out that it is not a benefit. Right? That is an independent, even though we're an agent of the town of Westborough, we're an independent entity. So the fact that we're making this available to town employees does not require any impact bargaining with the unions or acceptance. It doesn't become any part of contract or labor agreement. It's not part of the employee policies and the employment policies of the town. It's a program being offered by the trust of the generosity of the residents and the citizens and taxpayers of Westborough town meeting who's voted the money to come into the trust. We are actively looking for additional sources of revenue for this. We'll be applying for a grant from TD Bank, their charitable foundation that has a housing specific program. Again, this year, that would provide us with potentially 2 years of funding for this program going forward. I have to get that done because that's due Friday. Okay. Other trust projects, I'll go through quickly. I mentioned 1830 Lyman Street, the subsidy that's 132 unit development. They're increasing from 20 to 25% certified SHI. It adds 6 actual affordable units to the town's inventory, but because we hit that 25% threshold and it's in perpetuity, it will add 132 units to the way SHI is counted by the state. 25 Connector Road, it's a conversion of an extended stay hotel to small apartments. Their cap rate for the project is lower, so we're adding 5 affordable units with a $360,000 subsidy. That'll add an additional 109 units. So between the two projects and the money we're spending, we're adding 241 units to the town's SHI. That's roughly a 2% increase in our SHI percentage. That helps, we believe that will protect us not just in the 2030 and 2040 census, but probably in the 2050 census, based on even the completion of the Pulte development and projected growth rates for the town. It's not that we don't want more affordable housing being built. We just don't want it built under hostile 40B conditions. We want it to be built within the master plan and the work of the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, where the town has control, so that what does get built fits within the community and serves the community in the best way possible.
Right now, we're at, with our SHI at 11.7%. So we're in good shape now, but, once again, as Alan said, as Pulte comes fully on board, as well as, other units being brought on from development at Westborough Shopping Center and Connector Road, those are going to push up, but by doing subsidies with those, we're able to lock in all those units as opposed to only a portion. So.
Other things we've done very quickly, we partially funded the town's housing production plan in partnership with the planning board. We fund 11 hours a week of the assistant town planner position. That gives us administrative staff support for the work of the trust. The assistant town planner will become certified in affordability monitoring and the auction process. Not that we will do it in-house, the auction process in-house, but the town is becoming responsible for the compliance monitoring of developments as their funding from mass housing ends. So the restrictions in perpetuity, but the responsibility for compliance monitoring shifts from the state to the town. And so by making this investment in the town planner position, We're going to fund the education necessary to get her, for her to get certified. We'll have someone on staff who can legally sign off on the documents that HLC will say, oh, good, they're in compliance. The Housing Trust serves as the Housing Partnership Committee. We actually are starting to get involved. There's one coming our way soon, an LIP, LAU review, local. These are local initiative program and local action units for affordable housing. The Housing Partnership Committee will need to authorize the chair to sign off on those before the state will certify the development is complying with the regulations. That's an important measure to protect the town, to make sure nothing in the documentation, even if it's a mistake, puts the town at risk with respect to those affordable units. We have a representative sitting on the Community Preservation Committee who's led the effort to draft the affordable housing guidelines. That's in process. We've done some advocating at the state level. And the town level, we were able to secure a $500,000 earmark in the housing bond bill for future land acquisition in preparation. Of course, that's funny money until the state actually issues the bonds. And once they issue the bonds, we have to fight for our $500,000 to be what it's going to be spent on, but we will. But at least it's there. I'll also thank the town and the DPW. They put in $1 million earmark for infrastructure improvements related to the development of affordable housing. So if there was going to be a development of affordable housing that needed more water and sewer pumping stations, for example, that is a type, road work, anything like that, there'd be potential funding from the bond bill for that, supporting the efforts of the town. We also worked to support the new inclusionary zoning bylaw and other town initiatives that are supporting affordable housing. Long-term initiatives. We're not just working on stuff today. We are working to build a long-term partnership with the Westborough Housing Authority for the redevelopment of the existing Rogers Road facility, and if we're able to, if the town, when the town decides to dispose of the senior center property, if it's something the Housing Authority believes they would like to further develop, we would partner with them to acquire that property and assist them with the funding and the mechanisms of developing additional public housing or private affordable housing on that property. We're also looking at the potential of the Housing Authority being the management agency for future trust rental properties. This would provide them an income stream, help stabilize their finances, and provide an affordable alternative for the trust should we ever decide to hold on to properties and be the landlord. I mentioned the housing bond bill funds. We're looking at proposing a bylaw for the town, which is new legislation last year, Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5O. It's the letter O, not the number 0. Don't ask me why they didn't skip O and go to P. To avoid the confusion, it's not my job, it's above my pay grade. This allows, it's a local option property tax credit for SHI compliant rental units. And so a couple of communities have started drafting these. We're looking at those. We're looking at potentially proposing a local tax exemption for affordable rental units when those units exceed any requirement the town or the state may have on the development. So if they're 40B and they're 25%, they don't get it unless they go above 25%. What this really would enable is when you have owners of small multifamily housing rental units, the 4-unit, the 8-unit, the 10-unit, they can take a percentage of those, get them certified as SHI compliant with the state, and they'd be able to then come to the town and get a proportional, based on a schedule, a proportional or somewhat proportional discount on the property tax that helps offset the lost revenue from the affordable units.
And there's quite a few
and there's
in town.
And the intent, when the state did this, the intent wasn't just that the town was going to reimburse landlords for doing this. By having SHI units, it opens up low interest financing for capital maintenance and repair projects. There are other programs that having those units enable them, which allows properties to be better maintained and rehabbed and things of that nature. So we're in the research phase. If we could get it for a fall town meeting, fine. If not, it's another 6 months to a year away. There's obviously a lot of work involved and a lot of implications we have to look to, because there is a financial impact on the amount the town would collect on the tax levy. So that takes us to where we are today, which is currently numbered Article 21, the transfer of funds. This is to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $201,194.34 from the Stabilization Fund mitigation to the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust, or take any other action thereon. As you remember, when Pulte was issued their special permit, they had the option of building 25 affordable units someplace else in town, or providing the town with $1.4 million, $600,000 due on the anniversary of the permit, $200,000 due every subsequent anniversary. That number is the estimated amount of the most recent payment plus the interest that will have accrued by town meeting. So that would adjust. This money can only be used for the development of affordable housing units and inventory. It has to go into this mitigation fund because the housing trust didn't exist at the time, so it couldn't come directly to us. So this is that standard transfer. We did one at fall town meeting. And so this is just capturing the next payment.
So this is the one that, that fund is only for this, whereas
Yeah.
we've transferred in the past some money from funds that could be
Yes.
that or seniors. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
the stabilization fund for Del Webb Lake Chauncey, which was the $9 million settlement and agreement related to the zoning variance and the waiving of the permit requirements for the affordable units in the project altogether. We've received 1.8 million, a little over 1.8 million out of those 9 million, the first 3 payments. Those funds come into the town. It's a requirement for the certificate of occupancy of each building as they get built. So as they're ready to occupy a building, they have to write a nice check that goes into the fund. Those funds by the ZBA decision can be used for affordable housing or other projects for the benefit of senior citizens. And
Such
so,
as senior
such
center.
as the senior center build out, things of that nature. And typically you would use those funds, the town would use those funds for things that would otherwise be a borrow.
Very good. Okay, we do have 2 members remote, so I'll start with them. Rod or Beth, do you have any questions?
Well, my question was the same as yours, Walter, and that was whether this could be used for the senior center. And I'm realizing it doesn't. When is the next amount of money from the Del Webb available to use for the senior center?
So the stabilization fund for Del Webb Lake Chauncey exists. I'm not sure of what the balance is right now. That money is available, whatever money's in that account could be put before town meeting to transfer for use on the senior center. It might be, I've lost track of the number of, I'm not sure if they've gotten their 7th CO or their 8th at this point, or they're still on their 6th, I'd have to look that up, but I believe there's at least 1.8 million plus interest accrued, possibly as much as close to 3 in that fund.
Obviously, the treasurer collector would know, or the accountant, would know the balance in that fund. Specific fund.
Okay. Beth? You're muted, but maybe,
Yeah, sorry. I'm good with just listening at this point.
okay. Andrew?
So, 2 questions. One, with regards to I saw you talking about sale prices for homes. Could you tell me what happens to the money when some of these properties are finished being developed and we can turn them into a sale?
So the general process is that the trust sells or transfers the property to a developer. Attached to the purchase and sale is a land development agreement that becomes an appendix to the deed, which requires the development of the affordable unit and sets compliance with state regulations and any conditions the trust puts on that development agreement have to be met for that building to be built and for the deed to be valid. And there are even conditions in our land development agreement that if certain milestones and benchmarks aren't made, we have the right to reclaim the property without recourse. So we could go into court and say, it's in the agreement, they didn't do it. Judge says, yep, boom, property's ours, we owe the developers out whatever they're out for the work they've done to date. So we learned by looking at some other agreements in other communities that not having the carrot's good because that's the subsidy, but having the stick is a useful tool as well. So what happens when the unit's ready for sale is the developer has to, either themselves or with a certified contractor, run a fair housing marketing campaign and offer the property. If more than one eligible family comes up in the offer period, there's a lottery or a drawing that's done to see who gets the property. At that point, when it's ready for sale, EOHLC does the final price setting. They have a formula. It ties into HUD rules as far as what AMI is. They look at mortgage rates and basically come up so that the monthly cost of owning the home, which is the mortgage plus PMI insurance, if there has to be any, and some affordable housing loans waive the PMI, is less than that 30% at the AMI level for the property. And so you sort of take, what do you need the mortgage payment to be, and you back it out. That determines the sale price.
And they also look at other things such as utilities. What does it cost to maintain the house?
And when you look at the development cost of the house, for affordable housing, there is a limit there's a profit cap for the developer. And so when you look at the cost of development, it's the actual cost of development, including that property, including that managed or mandated profit margin, if you will. You look at the revenue they're going to get from the sale, the difference is where the subsidy comes in. So when we're looking at, when we're saying our maximum subsidy would be $172, and the property will sell for approximately $230,000, that's because the cost to build the unit is those two numbers added together.
So at no point in that does money make its way back
No.
from the sale back to
No.
okay. The other question I had was with regards to something I just sort of a recurring thought I just heard about, and I'm curious about the town liability, because I heard that we're going to become related for compliance. I heard we're going to become a bank, potentially, as people, or because we're a lender, excuse me, I didn't want to use the wrong terms. With multifamily things, we may have tenancy issues, but the fact we're playing in the low market housing environment, it just seems that we become target rich for issues with lawsuits or any number of other things, or if we are the owner of first resort for any of these things. But am I misunderstanding the liability or potential liability?
The liability ends with the trust because we're a separate entity.
Okay.
So we're a separate governmental entity. The fact that we're an agent of the town means, for example, that we can use the treasurer collector to manage our funds and the finance director to, pay the bills and run the checking account for us and have those services. If the trust borrows money, the town's finances as a whole don't play into it. It's the asset and revenue prospects of the trust that are used for that. So the town is protected from the liability of the actions of the trust. Even so, that's why we suggested oversight from the select board as we make any larger commitments, or we're up and running and committing a large portion so that, we want that. Would the trust ever own the property and rent it out? At this point, we can't see doing that, just sort of the way current affordable housing numbers work. There are advantages to private development right now. So for example, the low-income housing tax credit, projects that use that end up selling those credits to companies who have surprisingly, nothing to do with low-income housing. They don't care about it. There's a big tractor manufacturer in the US that buys these things up left and right because they're arbitraging their tax liability. And if they can pick up, $1 million tax credit that on their books would be worth 1.2 million and it costs them 990,000, they're like happy. And so when we look at the loan program and the deferrable loans, part of what we're doing is we're limiting the assets we're putting at risk. Right? So, we know that if there is a default, on the property, okay, we're a lien holder, we're not first in line, but we should recover some of it. But we know the maximum loss the trust would take is the amount of the grant. And as we're willing to grant those funds to low-income households below the 80% AMI, we're prepared, and we've made a strategic decision that says if someone, when they go to transfer the property can't pay off the loan, yet we're taking a loss. But that liability is limited to us.
Okay, thank you. And that liability isn't compromised by the fact that you're partially paying for an employee of the town? That
No.
doesn't pierce the veil or anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
All the properties that we have, which are the two plots that we talked about on High Street and on Beach Street, they're all insured. So we have liability. The trust buys liability insurance for that. So.
Okay, Adam, any questions?
Yeah, so from my side, maybe one quick question, I guess. So presentation was information rich and maybe I missed it. So this transfer of 200,000, is it for specific purpose or this is regular transfer of annual payments that are being made to the stabilization fund?
This is a regular transfer of the funds, of the payments being made. We do not have a specific project in mind. The funds, and we track the funds, are for the development or provisioning of affordable housing.
Okay, so that's the transfer of the payment that is
Yeah.
made to the stabilization fund, and this will support one of those initiatives that you were discussing.
It'll
in the
support
presentation.
the development initiatives we currently have, or we will hold as an asset, cash asset, until such time as we have a reason to use the funds.
Okay, thank you.
I just had, first of all, great education as well for all of us. I think, as I understand, and if I've understood correctly, I think the first importance is to be compliant, SHI compliant, which is I think above 10%, which I believe you mentioned a number which is 11% plus, so which is great. I think my only question is, and this may be, please correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you determine that housing project that we are taking up as, and giving to the developers for building more affordable houses, which is great, but how do you bring in, how do you make sure that you're bringing those affordable houses will bring in enough tax revenue for the services that may need? Because as you know, currently the issue we have is generating more and more property taxes. So how do we go about thinking that, okay, if we build more affordable houses, they're gonna give us enough revenue for probably the services they may need as well, which could be school, which could be DPW, et cetera, et cetera.
The short answer is the house like we're looking at, let's say 3 Baylor Avenue, for
Sure.
example, that sells for $230,000. That'll become the assessed value.
Okay.
Okay, so whatever tax rate we have
Yeah.
will be there. Once again, this is subsidized housing, and I think people realize, you have to realize, we as a town believe it's important to provide housing as best we can for as many people as we can. And by subsidizing both through like trust subsidies, et cetera, as well as town taxes, if you will, longer term, we are providing that subsidized housing.
Okay.
So you don't look at it as, some people say, oh, well, we're losing tax dollars. Well, none of the things we're doing is losing tax dollars. Yeah, that we've done.
So So having more affordable housing units, if you replace a market rate unit with an affordable unit, then yes, the revenue you're getting for that property from a tax standpoint goes down. 45 High Street is a vacant property. The town's owned it and hasn't received any revenue for that since it acquired it out of a tax title taking in 1945. Okay. 6 Beach Street is a vacant property that is not to code and could not be occupied as is. The value of the 6 or 7 affordable units will be significantly greater to the town from a tax than the single family home that's on it currently that was occupied that's now vacant. When you look at larger projects, the impact of the tax differential becomes relatively small as a percentage. The other thing I'll point out is there have been longitudinal studies that show that communities that have affordable housing blended in with the market rate housing hold property values better and see stronger property values over time than comparable communities that don't have the affordable housing component. And while that's counterintuitive, because there's the fear that, oh, if there's an affordable home in my neighborhood, my property value is going to go lower, it's because affordable housing fosters a more diverse socioeconomic mix, which is the mix you need to support local businesses, for people to afford to live in the community, who can then shop in the community. So there's broader impacts to the town that help the community and the financial aspect of the community be healthier over time. And what's interesting is of the markets that were studied, in one particular study, they found that was true everywhere except for Boston. The city of Boston specifically. Why? Because the vast majority of affordable housing in Boston are in large, mid-rise and high-rise buildings in concentrated neighborhoods that are, anywhere from 4 to 20 square blocks big. And when it's concentrated like that, you're not getting the socioeconomic diversity in the communities and in the neighborhoods that help sustain the small business and the local businesses.
Thank you.
Gene? anything?
No questions. Thanks.
No questions. Okay. I was just, as a reminder, the AMI also varies with number of people in the family or something?
Yes,
I mean,
AMI's, so
what you
the average
qualify.
median income, the baseline, they say, is a family of 4,
Yeah.
but HUD sets it hopefully in March every year.
Yeah.
2024, they were late by about 6 weeks. We'll see what happens this year with the current administration, but it scales based on the number of persons in the household.
Okay, very
And
good.
so what
And they do
is-
it by
what is-
area. We're like in eastern Worcester
Yeah, no,
County
I'm good.
area,
They moved us into just Worcester.
just into Worcester.
Okay,
Last year, we were just in.
Okay.
but,
Thank you.
So they're trying, because obviously cost of living varies and incomes vary, different parts of the country and different areas of the state.
thank you very much for the very informative presentation and all the work, great work you're doing. I'd like to move forward with a vote on Article 21 now, if you want to make a
Yeah.
motion.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to transfer $201,194.34 from the stabilization fund to the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust. Bradley, second.
Bradley, second. Any further discussion from anyone? Hearing none, we have to do a roll call vote because we are hybrid. And I think we start with you, Prashant. Yeah.
Ahuja, yes.
Lundberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Chimala, yes.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Gafford, yes.
Okay, so we have 800 with 8 present. Thank you very much.
Walter?
Thank you.
We're underway on
Walter?
our ATM season now with our first vote.
Like we put together
Walter?
trigrams for
Yeah?
the 2 programs we talked
I
about.
have one unrelated question for the trust.
Okay, go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, so just trigrams.
Is there any logic to the trust sponsoring Article 17 for the surveying, subdividing, and appraising into the senior center property?
This is the Rogers Road surveying. So the question was, is there any logic to the trust sponsoring that versus, I don't know, I think it's coming, from the select board or something, I think, no.
Just food for thought.
It's food for thought. We can discuss that with the trust. The concern I would have is that if the trust is going to fund that, there'd be an expectation that the trust would be acquiring the property.
Yeah.
And I will switch from my land trust hat. As much as I think the trust and the housing authority can do
trust
amazing
hat.
things with those properties. Hold on.
To my select
I
board
can't
hat.
speak for the select board, but I would expect the select board would want to put that property out to bid and get the absolute most it could for the property. And
It's,
that would put the trust in a competitive bidding situation.
Walter?
Yeah, recognize Christie for a comment.
Yeah, so it's not trust property. The town meeting would need to transfer it to the trust for them to be a sponsor of that article.
There's the legal answer.
Okay, there's the legal
Thank
answer.
you.
Good answer. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys coming by on short
you.
notice and
Thanks,
coming.
guys.
Okay, Mr. Savoy, are you here for comment tonight? Now's your chance. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wilfred Savoy, 41 Chestnut Street. This paper is basically a continuation of some of the suggestions that have been on ways to address the spending of the town beyond the means of the taxpayer. The first item talks about realistic estimate on town receipts. I've brought this subject up before. There's been some feedback on it in terms of restrictions of the Department of Revenue in establishing an estimate for receipts. Remember that receipts are deducted from the amount of money that the town wants to spend, and the lower the estimate, obviously, the more money that the town has to raise and appropriate through taxation. The restrictions that the Department of Revenue place on the estimate is that you cannot have an estimate greater than the previous year's receipts. So right now, it looks as though the town is estimating $510,000 for local receipts above the FY '25 number. And in the chart that I've given you on the first chart shows that the estimate versus the actual ranges from $3 to $4 million difference. So you're looking at quite a level there. And also the actual amount of receipts compared one year to the other is about $1 million. So again, the estimate that the town is making is quite underfunded, which leaves more money for the taxpayer to pick up. So that's the first point I'm making. And the second chart shows you a breakdown of the individual receipts, where they come from and so forth and so on. So bottom line, the estimates are really low, therefore more money to the taxpayer. The second point is appropriations for public schools. We know from the the summit meeting last week. The select board is going to pursue a 1% reduction, proportional reduction in the budget of the general town expenses and the school department. And just wanted to point out in this area where the vote of the town meeting in appropriating funds for the school department is on the bottom line only. That is the restriction of the law, and I've given you a copy of the law. The appropriating authority, that is the town meeting, cannot specify any particular cuts, only the bottom line. It can make non-binding suggestions, but the bottom line is the only one. So I'm hoping to see that the select board and the finance committee make recommendations at town meeting with regard to this cut. I don't know what the negotiations between the select board chairman and the school committee chairman have resulted in. Maybe there'll be some discussion tonight, but bottom line, at town meeting, I'd like to see a recommendation by the select board and the finance committee with regards to reductions in that budget. Finally, there is a provision in Prop 2.5 law, which I've given you a copy of, that section, that talks about a reduction in the amount of taxes that can be paid. It's called an underride. I have mentioned this before. I've given you a copy of the law. Basically, a binding question can be placed on the ballot by a majority vote of the select board or by a local initiative petition by the citizens. That would put a binding question on the ballot for a reduction or an underride. There is some question as to whether there can be a local position because it doesn't specify it in the town charter. I'm pursuing that a little bit, but nonetheless, you can get a binding question on the ballot to reduce the amount of money raised from taxation. So 3 areas, giving you more information on them. And again, I would urge that the Finance Committee consider these as actions to reduce the taxpayer to the average household. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Fred. I think just one small correction. I think the limit would be on our ability to tax. It doesn't change your tax rate. It just you can reduce the maximum tax levy that would be possible, which right now is about, 10 million north of what we are taxing at. So that override you're talking about, or underride, sorry. Okay, very good. Thank you for your efforts and your information. Okay, so next up, I want to go through, basically, I want to start arranging our guests, so I'm going through the articles kind of quickly because there are only so many that need guests, but I want the liaisons to start working on that. So from my list, I'm going to start with Article 9, which is Westborough TV funding. We don't have a liaison to Westborough TV, so I've taken the effort to get in touch with them, and my feeling is that we ought to come a little closer to knowing the number, but before we have them here, but I will arrange that. Community preservation, I don't believe we had someone for that anyway, so I reached out to them. They did have a meeting this afternoon, so I sent them an email ahead of time letting them know that we'd like to see them sometime. The next one right now is 11D, Small Business Grant Program, and EDC, and that's Josh, who's not here, so I'll ask Josh to follow up with them. We covered a whole ton of things at the summit. I'm going to skip through the school stuff because we'll probably have them back at some point. with the exception that, Beth, I think you're our Assabet liaison, and if you could reach out to them, because we'd like to have them here for a presentation at some point.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. Next up is an Article 16 on tree removal money from conservation, and Adam, you're our conservation, so talk to them. This survey and rescind borrowing, I think we will do with probably Christie at this point, some other meeting. Library building repair, I'm the liaison, and I've arranged for them to come on March 3rd and give a presentation. They will have had bids all in by about the week before, and are presenting to the select board, I think, about the Tuesday before, or something like that. So we'll see them the following Monday. Sustainable Westborough, Andrew, you're our liaison. If you could reach out to them, they have a energy code article.
Certainly.
See if we can get that. We already did the housing trust. Sorry, I jumped in on Rod's turf there. He is our liaison, but I just happened to ask those guys because I was hoping to fill in tonight. So, and then the DPW and Planning Board, Prashant, those are all yours. So there's Planning Board Articles 23 through 26, and the I think the only one we will need to hear from the DPW is the bylaw at the end, number 22. We heard from them at the summit, so unless people feel like they need more, then we're kind of done with them. But that one wasn't written yet, so we couldn't. So I think you can wait on that one. But and maybe these other bylaws aren't written yet either. So, but we got to start fitting them into the schedule somewhere, and hopefully in February for some of those. I'm hoping.
Walter, I did have one question.
Oh, yeah, sir.
On the DPW, and I'm open to what the rest of the committee thinks, but item G is for water repairs,
Yeah.
a water study, a mechanical and structural evaluation of the water booster stations. I'd like to see those items broken out as opposed to lumped into one. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I don't know how to actually react to that. We don't write their articles. I mean, you would saying you
Well-
wouldn't support the total amount, but you would support parts of that amount?
Yep.
Okay.
Or at least get a breakdown.
So which amount are we looking for the breakdown?
This is Article 12G,
12G.
which is water
Yes.
management improvement, currently 525,000. You might be able to find some of those numbers if you go back to warrant version 1, because some of it was split out previously. But you can ask that question. Excellent. Okay. There are new articles because we don't have a new warrant. That's good. Those are requests. Okay, budget discussion. I'd like to sort of catch people up on where we ended and where we're at right now. Two of you guys weren't at the summit. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it or not. But by the end, there was sort of just 4 or 5 of us left, so.
Four. Very
Okay.
specifically,
It
not
wasn't,
five.
well, 5 until Parada had to go.
Yeah.
So certainly, we weren't in a position to do any voting, nor would I think that would be appropriate, because at least tonight, we have 8 of us here. The long and the short of it is, there was a lot of discussion about, even Wilfred Savoy sort of alluded to this, was there were different motions on, rather than accepting the budget at the current town manager and superintendent recommendations, was to reduce that by some amount. And we heard numbers, Rod, for instance, suggested it getting it down to a 4% increase, which was about a 2.4% decrease in the number. We're currently at about 6.4% increase. And we talked, there was a number of 2% thrown around. And at some point, we started putting sort of a number of employees to that and thinking things through. And at least these two and myself actually felt that that type of decrease, the 2.4% would be about a 3-point-something million. Back of the envelope calculation, that's 30-something less employees if it's all salary. It isn't going to probably be that way, but the majority of it is, and that seemed to several of us that's a little too much to change too quickly, and you're also got to realize that by reducing the employee count, you're reducing services in some fashion. Your schools can't provide the same services, your town can't provide the same services. So as Fred mentioned, the select board, who was in full force at the time, came up with an idea of, okay, well, we want to do something, and we want to do something meaningful, but not somewhere where it was so much. So anyway, the idea of this 1% reduction of the overall number, which isn't just of the general fund, which is approximately $130 million. That includes insurance, that includes everything but the enterprise funds, I'm pretty sure. I'm interested in, as well as so we had our finance team meeting today, which, as you know, consists Patrick's in that, and so it's the school chair, and then the finance people, and the superintendent, town manager, assistant town manager. And so the discussion was around that and how we would get to that. How would they figure that out and come back and present stuff? And the long and short of it is we're on a kind of short schedule here, and there's some. And one of the big influences on reducing the number is potentially we have a reasonably high ballpark estimate for what the borrow that will go out in early March will cost, interest rate, which affects the number. So the long and the short of it is we probably won't have a full proposal until somewhere in early March. We might even have there's a proposal to have another tri-board meeting circa the first week or second week of March, probably first week, end of first week, because it is important that, we are looking at both halves of the house, but that the school committee and the select board are in agreement on doing something, otherwise you end up with kind of this lopsided thing. The school committee is normally not at that summit other than during the school part, so they weren't there at the end to weigh in with their thoughts and opinions, so it was a little difficult to hatch. So that's kind of where we are, and I would like to get the sense of this committee of what you are thinking in terms of those numbers. I would probably like to see if we would like to support with a motion this 1%. That failing, then hear what other thoughts people had. So open it up for discussion. Gene.
It occurs to me that there's such a big part of the budget that's fixed cost that is going to be what it is going to be, and we're not going to know until March. I would set that part of the budget aside as part of this discussion. They could get that whole 1% savings from the borrow. It's not, that wouldn't really have done what we're asking them to do, you know? So I would focus on, the rest of the budget. So without looking at the fixed costs, I would focus on that percentage and, I would put out there, I'd be curious to know what it would look like to get to a, 0.5% reduction on both the town side and the school side without the fixed costs. I think to get down to the bigger reductions, I just think it's a lot of work for both the town and the school, and what they ultimately come back for, I don't think we would support as a reduction anyway. I think it would be such a huge cut to services that we'd say, no, not that. So I think that, like that 4% ceiling, I think would gut both the school and the town services.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I would propose.
And also there are things that, that can be thought of, such as, like bus fees and things like that, which are alternative revenue sources, et cetera.
But we're not talking about the revenue, we're just talking about the budget.
Right.
Or I'm at least just talking about the budget right now.
So just for I understand, Gene, what you're saying is just recommend a 0.5% cut across the town, which means every department, or are we
No.
going let the town manager decide where exactly that 0.5% will come from? What is essential, what is not essential, and accordingly it will come. That's what you're
Right.
proposing.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And the same
Perfect,
on the
yeah.
school side, but excluding the fixed costs.
Fixed
I mean,
costs. Yeah.
those fixed costs,
Yeah.
we're hoping they come down. They might also go up.
Yeah, there's additional amount to be, because the town side has so many contracts open, we don't even, right now, there's a placeholder at 2%.
Right.
If the contracts came in significantly higher, well, any higher.
Right.
That adds to the number as opposed to bringing it down, so that half becomes a bigger number anyway.
But it doesn't have to add to the number. That's the issue here with the people. Like, it only adds to the number if the number of people is constant. So I think.
Adds the number anyway, even if there were less people, it's added to the number that's there now.
Sure, but with enough fewer people, it actually goes.
True, yeah, but.
And I'm not suggesting that, to be
Yeah, yeah,
entirely clear.
Yeah.
I guess one of the pieces to the conversation that I'd be curious to know, what does attrition look like in this town? Because we talk about cutting people, and attrition's not perfect because it's not targeted. But what would happen? Like, what do we usually have year over year in the school system, for example, like that we would expect it to drop by? And I think that may have an impact on what it is you can then turn around and worry about not having to lay off. If you know that it's just.
I think you might, well, if you did the 30-something people, that's probably different. But there, for instance, this year in the budget as it exists already, there are 5 positions in the schools being taken out and some fraction of one going back in. And the expectation is that those are people that are giving, are retiring, basically.
Okay.
So the problem is you can't, first of all, it's up to the school committee to decide how they want to run and who they want not to be there if you're going to limit the funding. But if, 3 science teachers retire in the high school, you can't just say, okay, those are the positions that are gone, right?
No, I understand.
Yeah. Beth has her hand up.
Yeah, hi. I mean, I'm a little bit, sorry, there's Hugh Jekin. I'm a little bit concerned about concerning the volume of the cut, given we keep pushing future needs down the road to where they get much more expensive.
Employees get more expensive? I don't understand.
The cost of doing the maintenance on the road, if we don't do, let's say we only do half road maintenance that the DPW planned.
Well,
And
when-
sometime we have to finish it.
But nobody, actually, so far, nobody's mentioned cutting maintenance or, and certainly
Well,
not
no, but I'm
half.
just saying, when you make.
I mean,
the-
I'm
when
thinking
you
you're
make
talking about
these-
1% here. And,
Well, okay. Sorry, the echo's driving me crazy. What I'm trying to say is, like, we're short-staffed in the fire department and the police department. And I'm just concerned that we're not being forward-thinking.
that may be the case. I mean, there's no doubt a reduction of the budget reduces your capabilities, and you have to own up to that. The question is, right now, you're at a 6.4% increase in taxes, and so the question is, would people prefer to have a little less services, or some less services, and $150 in the pocket of the average single-family homeowner for the year? Or would they prefer to have the same services and $150 less? I think a lot of feedback that's coming in is we should be doing something to move in a direction where we're not just continuing the status quo. At least the impression I get. I've not seen the select board vote with 5 people to do what they did at that meeting on Thursday. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, I mean, last year, maybe you brought up a few things and a couple other people are on the fence, but that was a 5-0 vote from the select board, thinking that we have to do something, and what it is exactly, I don't know, but they're also looking for our opinions, so that's partially why I want to hear from you guys too. So, anybody else? More thoughts?
One more thought. Could we delay the library project for the senior center for a year to affect those savings?
You delay?
No,
Probably not.
no, it's not in the budget for,
Yeah, it's large, I mean, it's largely capital, I'm sure it will affect it doesn't affect,
it does
it's
not
not
affect
in
the
the
town
budget, but obviously, there's some amount of tax dollars that are saved if you
Right.
don't do projects, except for you're repairing the building while you're waiting, and construction costs all go up, so
But that's a different discussion
yeah.
than cutting the town budget.
And I will say that I tried to watch the meeting, but it wasn't posted yet I was gonna check after this meeting and see if it's gonna get posted. The picture's there, but I couldn't actually play the
Oh,
video.
really?
Yeah, it's on.
It's up, was that today or, because I couldn't run it over the weekend?
Last night. It was
Fantastic. So I will be jumping on that, and I apologize if I missed this portion, but.
It's hard to cover 8 hours
It's
in your
tough.
spare time, even at double speed.
Yeah, 1.5. I will get to it, but because I very much want to catch up with it. But the conversation with regards to the spending, was there any conversation about efforts made with departments to talk about where they could lose? And I go back to a comment Christy made here in one of our meetings, which is when we talked about how, we just sort of build over time. Her observation was, we don't just build a little over time, we actually add a little more every time we do that from our from
So-
what we approve, so.
I would say that the speakers did address things that they were doing in their department for efficiency,
Great.
where their shortages were, and things that they were doing. One of Christie's slides actually that we called out about, I don't know, 8 or 9 things that are complete that were just done, and 3 or 4 other initiatives that were coming up. So
Fantastic.
I think
I'm
some of
looking
that
forward to
was addressed, at least more than in the past. I don't know if
Yeah, no, I
others
would agree
agree.
with that. I
Yeah.
would say every department head who
Fantastic.
spoke talked about it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so-
Still, after all of that effort, we're still at, 6.7% increase. So,
Right, and as Beth says, it isn't like you get out of there thinking, the police and fire department are way overstaffed.
Right.
You get out of there thinking, oh God, how did he get this done? Especially with, some of these, they don't have a full staff hired, so it's not really a budget problem for some of it, but they're missing people. But that was certainly the case, I think.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
If I may, just going back to your comment, Gene, I mean, what I look at is there are two components, right? One is the town budget, and I think it would be healthy for the town to relook and look for additional opportunities to reduce. But the other component is also capital investments, right? Which impacts our tax rates.
Yep.
One is library, so I don't know if there is opportunity there to size the project to what needs to be done versus what we would like library to look at.
Oh, absolutely, and I didn't mean to suggest that wasn't coming from taxpayer dollar. I'm just,
Yeah.
we're trying to, Christie
Agreed.
was very clear, and we've been talking about this for years. How can we affect the budget, blah, blah, blah. She was very clear. She wanted a target from us. We didn't give it to her. We couldn't, we weren't.
But
We didn't have enough
Agreed.
people. So I want to, it's like, I would like to leave tonight with a recommendation from the board with a target. It's specifically what she asked for.
And I guess I would say that the project, in my opinion, has been adjusted to be what we need.
what is necessary? Yeah.
Because you get to a point where if you're going to tear the building apart to put in the fire protection and the other accessibility requirements, that the other niceties that are going in are sort of just part of it. You're paying so much in a lot of ways that there isn't just like a lot of stuff that's thrown in. It's mostly sprinklers, roof, windows, and then we're changing the carpets in the floors, but you got to do that eventually anyway. HVAC units are failing, and so this isn't an expansion project. It's really sort of a base repair, and anyway, it's neither here nor there. But I don't think there's no magic way to. Yes, could you spend $3 million on the library and fix the air conditioning only? Yes, but then you still have a lot of other issues.
But so to continue my thought, I mean, on capital type of projects, the other one that comes to mind is community center, right? Is this the right time to continue with the community center and the plans as we thought that building to look at, or maybe we should rethink what to do with the community center, right? Because ultimately, if it's not this town meeting, it's going to be next town meeting, and the taxes are going to be increasing in the future, right? So that's another area to be.
Yeah, absolutely important topics.
Yeah.
When we agreed to do the community center, the estimate was about $180 or so to the average family home. Well, that's, so it's 150 or 160 this year or something, but that is about the number you're talking about saving with your 1%, but you own the building now, and so it's kind of hard to cut that part to zero. I mean, they put off building. Well, you say that, but sell the building? You mean just outright?
I'm not saying that we should do that, but
okay.
That's something that potentially could be considered, right?
I guess.
In the world of
Then you own
selling
the
buildings, I
community
guess,
center.
I didn't realize we owned a property for 80 years that was doing nothing. Like, is that the one and only piece of property in the whole town that we own that there's nothing happened to? I suppose, like, you look around, there's a number of other buildings that I think have an opportunity. Like, for example, the one right next to the borough, which I know the Boy Scouts use and is used for other things, but sell that, move the stuff to the building that we own, the community center. I mean, It seems we have assets potentially
You know where
that
the
we could
food
be.
pantry is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, I could be wrong, but I think the one he was talking about where nothing's been is where the gravel pit is. I think it's just open.
Correct.
Open
Correct.
space, yeah.
That's fine. I'm just saying
Yeah,
that we have
So
assets.
it's just, we have tons of open.
So I
space.
actually asked the
Yeah.
question last year, and we talked about the one that the food pantry's in, and apparently it's fully occupied and very busy, because I questioned that. The one other one we have that's not well utilized is the Harvey Building, which is where they're planning on setting up the regional communication center. So I did ask that question as we went through this process last year, and those were sort of the identified properties, right? So 45 Highs transferred, food pantry fully utilizes that building. I mean, in theory, we could sell the building and look for an alternate location.
Like maybe a community center which is not fully occupied and it has lots of room. I mean,
Yep. But so to that end, and that's actually not a terrible idea, and maybe that should be part of the conversation, but I think that's a one domino at a time sort of problem too. While I understand the lowering property taxes is a high priority, right? I'm continuously advocating for looking at it. I don't know that closing the food pantry is the way to do that.
It's closing it and be moving it.
Right, but I would think the community center has to then be set up,
Yeah,
was
why
my
don't
point.
you
Figure
think
out
that
the
would
community
cost more
center,
money?
then close it. So I don't disagree. My point was just the sort of order of operations.
Sure.
So, agreed. And I am very happy that they have a plan for the Harvey Building, because I don't know if you guys remember, it was a sensitive subject that I sort of harped on last year. 'Cause-
Well, it's not only a plan for the Harvey Building, we're getting that equivalent of the library building repair done on the state dime, which would have eventually come to us. And we're going to reduce our cost for EMS service on an annual basis in the next year, the year after this. And we're going to have hopefully better service, because there'll be 5 people on duty instead of 2. But, I mean, so that's an example of the other extreme of really good thinking and moving forward.
I guess
don't
the
know.
properties we've talked about are what we know we know. And until half an hour ago, we didn't know we owned property, a plot of property for 80 years that was doing nothing. Like,
Well, I
what
know.
else
We
is
actually
out
talked
there?
about
We
it
talked about it
last
last
year.
year, too.
I knew about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Yeah.
So until.
Which was part of the conversation, right? And that's what brought up this very same
Yep.
conversation last year when I said, wait a second, that's crazy. What else do we have?
And the
And
answer
so
is
I-
nothing else, except what we've already talked about.
Correct.
Okay.
So.
Anyway, I don't think all good ideas to throw out there, but none of that gets you to what the budget is for 2026. I mean, there's possibility you could postpone the financial parts of the town meeting till later in the year when things are more known, or people have more time to calculate. But I think it'd be much simpler to do something along the lines of what Jean had just suggested, and keep moving and see where you get it, town meeting in
I mean,
terms
I
of support.
also really like Jean's suggestion in that there are so many unknowns, and to say, come up with this arbitrary number we've picked, including all of these unknown things, doesn't necessarily make sense, right? So our goal is I want you to look at the budgets that you have control over and find cost savings there. And so narrowing it down to those departmental budgets over which they have control and saying, okay, this is where you're looking, right? I think makes more sense and gives them, to Christie's point, that give us a number, give us a target. It gives them really an actionable target to look
Right.
towards.
And they could come back and say, to do that, we'll have to not fill this position until next year. We'll have to hold off on filling this, and then we can respond to that. Because it's our responsibility to put the number in the warrant. It's our motion. Like, Christie's got her recommendation. The department heads have their request. She's got her recommendation, but it's the Advisory Finance Committee's number that goes in the warrant. And it's on the school side, it's the school department's number, and then it's our number that goes in the warrant that the motion's made on. So we have to come up with a number, and if we think this number is too high, and last year we had a lot of discussion, like days before town meeting, about can we change this number, can we drop this number? If we're gonna ask, them to drop it, we should really know what that's gonna look like. And again, the reason I came up with the 0.5% on the uncontrolled stuff is because I think more than that, I think is an exercise that's not gonna lead to us actually accepting the cuts. But that's, that's just me.
Meaning you don't want them to come back with such dramatic things that we're gonna say,
That we
never
go,
mind,
never
let's go
mind.
back to the
Yeah,
original.
we can't, that's not something we're gonna support.
So, Gene, in your suggestion, in the hypothetical $1 million budget, where half of it, $500,000 is fixed the expenses.
Yep.
You're suggesting take the other $500,000 and do a 0.5% on that?
No,
No.
I'm talking about doing a 0.5% reduction on the total budget,
Which is
Okay.
130 million.
which is 130 million.
Somebody
But-
do that math.
Don't come back and say, oh yeah, we got the 0.5% reduction because we're now estimating that the borrow is gonna go out lower than we thought it was gonna go. That's off the table.
Okay.
Like,
So what we talked
keep-
about,
Keep the borrow budgeted where it's budgeted.
Okay.
Keep, they've got a number for the insurance cost, keep that number where it is today.
So in other words,
Because that number is gonna change, it might go up, it might
Sure.
go down, it's gonna change, but for
so
the,
that's $650,000
yeah,
to take out of, because what you're saying is if the borrow comes down, that's additional
yeah, that would be
tax
more
rate
savings.
benefit.
Yeah.
right, the
So
idea
it'd
being they
be-
budgeted
it
the borrow
would-
at
it would be-
5%. If it came in at
right.
4%, they could say, oh, good, we're done.
Right. You're saying $650,000 basically out of a combination of school and
Yeah,
town department
Department.
budgets,
Right.
for lack of a better word.
right.
And,
And again, it's just a target,
yeah,
which is what Christie asked for. Give us a target
Sure.
and see what they come back with, and then we can respond to that. That's just my thought. I just don't want to, to Jane's point, I don't want them to come back and say, oh, yeah, I don't think interest rates are going to drop actually, but interest rates drop, we're done. That's not,
it's more if they're still at a rate that's lower than we have conservatively estimated.
Right.
Not necessarily, that
yeah, no,
I mean,
understand.
they can't go up probably, or it won't work that way.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I also want to clarify because I want to be clear that my intention because it sounds a little bit like our expectation is that Christie and the rest of the team might be disingenuous in their attempts to find savings. And that's
No,
not
no.
what I mean to apply. I assume that's
No.
not. And I just want to make sure that we're saying that. I mean, I
Oh,
just
yeah,
want to make
no,
sure
absolutely.
that the guardrails and our expectations are very clear rather than we expect John's overinflating the rates to try and pull
No,
the
no,
wool
that's-
over our
yeah, I'm
eyes,
sorry.
right? Like there's no expectation of ill intent. I just want to make sure that we're clear in how we're.
Thank you.
I-
No, absolutely.
I think what we're saying is that we'd like to have a small percentage less services.
Yeah,
A
that's what that
0.5%
means.
less
Yes.
services,
Yeah.
right?
mean,
And so,
because-
so your borrow is not related to the services, but we've cut it from 1%, including the borrow, down to 0.5%. But we want that to come from a meaningful change.
Or I'd like to see what that looks like
Yeah,
anyway.
Right.
obviously.
Let's see what it look.
So let me just ask Christie, who is here, whether, is that kind of direction useful?
Yeah, I think so. I thought that what Gene was initially saying, that 0.5% of the town, lower 0.5% of the town budget, it's
Lost
lower
you.
0.5% on the school.
We just lost sound. Well. Nope, we'll never know.
Can you get it on your laptop?
Oh, sometimes. Oh, I gotta shut off my microphone.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear.
We got her back in the room.
All right, try it.
You say that your microphone's on, maybe why there's echo.
Okay, I can hear you now.
I guess the select board was asking for percent, which 1% on the town side is $240,000. School side is $700,000. So then you said 0.5%, so I applied it similarly, but I think what you're saying is you want 0.5%, 130 million. So are you
Yes.
asking it proportionally?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be proportionally, but yes. That's what I'm
I guess I'm
envisioning.
just asking because superintendent has to go back and make some decisions, and I have to go back and make decisions. And so I'm just wondering what number I'm looking for.
Oh, so I think our intention would be that if you take the, I don't know, $55 million school budget-ish number, and you take
70.
whatever the rest of the town departments together are without the insurance, electricity, and other
Right.
fixed things, that would be your number, and you could do a ratio there, and the schools would, at that 650,000, the schools would take, I don't know what the other number is off the top of my head, but,
Okay.
does that make?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the, I mean, the only thing, there's some talk about savings by consolidating some things and who gets credit for the saving. I don't think we care very much. You know what I'm saying? Whether,
Oh, if there was a consolidation between the town and school,
Yeah.
that can add
Yeah.
into the total dollars. Yeah.
right. But yeah, no, basically, I was envisioning a proportional reduction.
I think
Yeah, I
there's,
think just for everybody who's supposed to that summit, I think, well, the school committee going to talk about that, work on finding efficiencies, that's something that will probably come a little bit later.
I think there may be another opportunity while this dissection is happening, because this is tough work and we don't want to have to do this year after year necessarily, is to talk about this as a 1% cut with a goal of a 0.5% cut and be able to explain what that extra 0.5% is saving. Because ultimately, that's the chance to say, hey, hang on a second here, maybe we can afford to do that. Or I don't know, that it just seems that there's an opportunity for an informed dialogue about what more than 0.5% looks like that we lose if we just do the 0.5% up front.
So a 1% cut if you don't look at the fixed costs.
Correct. So it's exactly like
Yeah,
you're talking
yeah.
about. It's a
Hold on.
1% cut.
It's a half the sentence
Yep.
represents cutting about 12 positions.
Okay.
So that, so that would be, 12 teachers or 12
Mm-hmm.
police officers or 12 firefighters.
That seems a little hyper targeted, but yeah, I get what you're talking about.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. To me, it seems a little high to target that, which is why I wound up on the 0.5%.
Yeah, but I'll say a 0.5%.
You can wind up on
yeah.
the 1%, but I didn't know if you had thought through what that would look like.
Only to say that I think that the assumption is that it's only people, which is probably the large majority of this, but where are those people coming from? 12 teachers feels very painful, but
Yep.
6 teachers, 6 administrators lands a little differently. So I'm just saying that the conversation about the difference between a 0.5% and 1%, there should be a line. I think there's an opportunity for a line of sight to what that means, because it's what our argument will be to the town, which is why 6.5% is now down to 4.5%, but it's worth it because to go any deeper, we'd be losing these. That's an informed conversation we couldn't have if we didn't look at that margin.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. I disagree with you, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm sticking with my 0.5%.
I like your idea of a goal of 0.5%, but seeing the opportunity, what it means to go to 1%, right? Because this is what we don't have visibility to, and town has. So I think it's going to start a discussion or a healthy discussion. Okay, cutting 1%, this means this. We can or we cannot do that. If we cannot do that, what about 0.5%, right? And that way we see what the impacts are to the town and what sensitivity on that is.
So would we throwing this out here without thinking very hard, but would we say that we'd like to see between 0.5% and 1% reduction excluding fixed costs? Or see what that would mean? Or should we just vote on half and see if people would rather vote on one if they don't approve it? I don't know what to do exactly. Because we'd like to give some direction to both, to people. I think the problem with what you're suggesting is it's, I think, too open-ended again.
I was gonna
And
suggest you
hard.
ask Christie about, I mean, that, to me, that seems like a huge
That's a
difference.
huge 2-to-1 number.
But she's the one who was asking for the target, so I'd be curious to hear from her.
It was also 2% not too long ago in the summit meeting. So at this point, 2 down to 1, down to 0.5. So yes, I'm not disagreeing with you. It seems like a significant difference, but it's also a big walk back from what we're talking about. So.
No, she's looking for a target from
Yep.
us.
Right.
So I'm trying to find out if, from her, if she thinks a target with that kind of range is what she's looking for, or is she looking for something more specific?
But, yeah, a recommendation from us, I guess.
Right.
Christie?
I mean, we could certainly present anything that you're asking for. I guess my concern, and the one that I brought up at the budget summit, is the chilling effect that you're gonna have on presenting cutting of positions, specific positions.
Yeah.
Especially if, I think as Jane and Keen said, if there's no intention to do it. But, certainly you can ask for that. The select board will have the discussion on Tuesday if they want to change what they've directed me to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain chilling effect in staffs if you are going to name specific positions on both lists, because if you take a risk of losing good employees, they say, oh, well, they may cut this. So I think that's a risk of, if you come up with this goal of 0.5% and sort of intend to do it, that's a little different than having both lists, which
That's
is a
fair.
problem with the both lists, but yeah.
But 0.5%.
And everything's so public, it's not, obviously, because it's.
Agreed. 0.5% though just doesn't seem like as much as a commitment as it seems a less serious commitment than a single percent. And I'm saying this, and you know the mood in the room from what you heard. 6%, 6.5%. That's big. Like,
Wait, the 1% included things that
Yep.
were still being resolved, and to a large extent, now you might still get to 1% if those things come lower, but you're saying you don't want it all to come from that. I mean, I think that's the part
Sure.
of Gene's
Sure.
thing that brings a little difference is, if we can borrow for less money, I think the feeling is, well, we haven't sort of solved our problem of trying to scale back a little bit on, just a small bit on
agreed.
what services people expect, and that this other may be a way of making that more happen. Yes.
So just to provide my input, I'd be in favor. It sounds like the select board voted for 1%, and now we're considering voting for something less than that?
Not really. So the select board voted for 1%, but that includes any savings and fixed costs. So it includes the borrow. So the borrow is in at 5%, and budgeted, I believe, at 5%. If that comes in lower, that goes towards the 1% savings. The insurance, the health insurance, town health insurance is estimated at forget what the increase is, but we don't know it yet. If that comes in lower, that goes against the 1%. So we're not, it's actually, It's actually not that dissimilar, and well, it depends what happens with the fixed costs, really.
I guess my viewpoint would be to vote for 1%, outside of the fixed costs. So the school board goes down 1%. The other town departments is not associated with fixed costs go down 1%.
In my mind, it's going to be easier to say, once we hear what that means, it's going to be easier to add a little back in if that's where we fear we've gone too wrong. It's going to be easy than it is to go the other way and just discover we didn't cut enough to make a meaningful impact to the people that are asking us to do this.
Can I just add, the health insurance, it is true that we have a final increase or a final number, but the work that we do to get that number down, it's not like that where it's just going to come in at whatever percentage and it's a recognized cost with no additional work done. So, I mean, if we're negotiating deductible levels, pays, I mean, that's real work and real impact. So, I think it's recognized in a different way. And it's work that we would do regardless. And I guess I just really want to be clear about that. There's a lot of this work we do regardless, inclusive of the debt, the health insurance, continuing to review everything, making sure our revenues we're following our revenues and we're estimating those all along the way.
Yep, okay. We lost Jane temporarily, so I'm wondering if we want to just vote on the two numbers and see where we end up. And then that could be our recommendation.
Yeah.
Probably wait for Jane to come back. Does that seem
Yeah, I
like,
mean, A and B, and then if it's tie, then we'll do one first.
we'll see.
Start with
We'll at
larger
least
number.
have given
see
our
if we can
opinion
improve
on the votes of 8 people, and they're watching the opinion too, so that can be
that.
useful.
On the upside, without Jane here, we have an odd number, so if we vote
We
quickly.
have odder people. Okay, so Jane, what we decided, it seems like we should, Christie, while you were away, made a point that the insurance budget actually is more related to not just something that randomly comes in, that comes through employees either negotiating or different, so maybe that would be included or not. So I'm not sure. Is there a revised opinion on that from, in your thing or not?
No, I don't think so. No,
Okay.
I'm still looking for, a 0.5%
Right.
cut in services.
Right. Okay, so it seems like the best thing to do to give our opinion at this point would be to vote on, say, 0.5% and the 1%. Rod spoke in favor of 1, and others have. So we see where as a board we stand, and we can give that advice.
So our vote is either half or 1 as we go around?
More like a straw poll, and then
Yeah.
and then we can have a vote on whatever.
Yep.
Oh, that's an interesting way to do it.
I mean, at least that would,
Rather than
unless we're
voting in
4-4.
favor.
Yeah, making different names.
Because we're totally going to end up 4-4.
Okay.
Murphy's Law, right? Like there's 4.
Well,
of
there
us.
are 8, but that's okay.
Somebody call Josh.
Okay, so yeah, let's take a straw poll first, and then we can make a more motion on that, I guess. So we would start, we have to put down a spot, Prashant, but alphabetically you're in.
Sure. So do I have to give a reason as well, or this has to
You
be
don't
just
have
a-
You don't have to, you're
But you
welcome
can.
to if you want,
No,
but
I think listening to everything, I would start with 1% just to get some idea about what exactly that means in terms of the services that we will lose. Or I know this, I agree to your point as well, Walter, but I still think that we need to have that information before we make a sound judgment. We may come back to half, we may come back to 0.25, but I think in my opinion, we should start with 1. Yeah.
okay. Next is Beth.
0.5%.
Bradley, 1.
Chimala, 1.
Only one. Oh, hold on, Brand's not here. Jane?
Probably half.
Leslie, half.
Half.
And Rod,
Stafford, 1.
1.
So we are 4,
1,
4.
2, 3, 4. We're gonna split it.
I jinxed us.
Do you have to
okay.
leave again? Maybe you go to the
You
bathroom and stay?
want me to step out?
Well, I think we can certainly advise the school committee of the thing that we think it should be between 0.5% and 1% of the amount, excluding the fixed cost. And
Walter, at the finance meeting?
Yeah,
Schools
finance
are
team.
represented, correct? Did they?
Yes.
Was there any discussion on whether, I mean, I assume they are at this point looking at, based on the conversation we just had, they are looking at reducing their budget also. They're on board with sort of the exercise and,
doing the exercise, yes.
okay.
Both the superintendent and the chair talked about doing it, and there was some discussion of, well, it's, yes.
Okay.
And then there was a lot of discussion on when everybody would have numbers again, because of a lot of this fixed cost stuff is later on. But yes. Yeah, but they weren't, it is again up to the school committee to decide where those people come from, not any of us that can do that.
Yeah, and I think just as an observation, even for the folks who voted 1, that there's still the possibility we could eke back from the 1. So this isn't a 1 versus a half. This is a half, satisfied with a half versus, investigating the 1, to me. And I don't mean to be pejorative about the half group. But I think, I don't want this to come off as,
We're only half
we're
as good as you.
That's
Clear.
Yeah, now I feel bad. I thought I was okay before. Okay. I don't see us going much further with this. I think that, as the town is, we are somewhat split on this issue, but not too far. I think as a summary, though, the entire 8 people have voted to at least wanting to see some change of 0.5%
Well,
there.
I'm
excluding
going
you.
to say that that's not the case.
Okay.
We really didn't have an option of 0.
Well, you could say 0 if you'd prefer. Not change anything.
0.
Okay.
Then the wins win.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, see that, I can't do that.
It just became 4-3-1.
Yeah, 4-3-1. Okay. Anyway, I mean, okay, so I shouldn't say everybody thinks that. Majority of the people felt there should be some change, and of the ilk of 0.5% to 1%. Okay. And I'm afraid that's about as good as you're gonna get out of us, Patrick and Christie, is what it is.
We all talked about it.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, and I think if we see where the numbers come in, and if we can make that choice, I guess, moving forward, we'll ultimately have to make a real decision on the number.
I'm gonna make one comment that most of the people don't want to hear, but, the other opportunities to lower the tax rate or to have a less conservative revenue, as Fred Savoy mentioned, or to use more of our free cash.
Can I just mention one thing?
Mm-hmm.
We're about $240,000 away from dropping below our goal for the use of free cash. So, and that doesn't include stabilization the school has put forward. So I think we need to be really careful about talking about using free cash. And then for folks who were not at the budget summit, I would just say that just because we estimate revenues to come in at a certain amount doesn't mean they come in at that amount. So we can't rely on estimates to change the tax rate.
Yeah, there was a
One-
brief
one-
conversation about the OPEB thing at the meeting as well. I don't think we ever decided to, I think we ended up not making any change there, but that's a, what is it, 600 or 800 this year? Of free cash that's being used, but the problem with doing that is that's clearly,
It's not 600 free cash.
okay. And
600 raise and appropriate, 200
right,
free cash.
if it's for free cash. But that also means the liabilities we're accumulating are being kicked down the road to future taxpayers too, which isn't a great thing to do either. Okay. I think that's about it for that. I thought just to talk a little bit about the budget supplement positive, I think we learned a lot in a fair amount of time, and the presentations were well done. Normally at this time I would go through the budget and sort of see which groups we want to hear from, but the whole budget's in such a sort of a little bit of flux here, so I don't think that makes sense at this time. But I will ask the members if there are, as you've gone through the budget books, departments aside from the ones we spoke to that you'd like to learn more, that we could plan on having more information from them as possible. Okay. In terms of future agendas, we are not going to have a meeting this Thursday, and our next meeting will be next Monday. We'll see who we can get for that or what we'll be doing. I'm not sure exactly yet. Liaison reports. Anybody updates?
Just a quick observation that the rec committee was usually going to be meeting tonight, but they chose not to. Next, they meet the first Monday of every month. So they're planning on talking about their articles next when we meet the first Monday of March. So if anybody has any questions between now and then you'd like me to ask, I think they kind of know where their stuff is right now. But just as a heads up, if anybody wants me to dig anything more deeply.
Oh, okay. Rec did come to the meeting, so at least I feel like I've learned pretty much enough on most of their stuff.
Excellent.
Because they came to the summit.
Okay.
But if, that's nice, if you do have questions, we'll certainly ask more. Anybody else? Anything? Okay. Minutes. Motion for January 6th and January 23rd minutes. This time we actually sent them out.
I'll again move that we accept the minutes of January 6th and January 23rd.
Could we do it separate? I
Can we
wasn't.
split them?
Yeah, okay. I amend that motion to accept the minutes from January 6th.
Is there a second?
Bradley, second.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion, corrections, comments? If not,
Would you abstain?
abstain, okay? Beth?
I think that one I was present, so, yeah.
Bradley, yes.
Chimala, yes.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Bradford, yes.
Okay, so that is 7:01.
Yep. And McMahon,
We had a motion for the 23rd.
McMahon, I move to accept the minutes from the January 23rd meeting.
Bradley, second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, Prashant?
Ahuja, yes.
Beth?
Blumberg abstain.
Okay.
Bradley, yes.
Chimala, abstain.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Bradford, yes.
That is 6:02. I mean, I'm not used to going after Jane yet. I think I've still got Dolanitis or something, you know, because I feel like there should be one more name before. Okay. That's all I got. Anybody have anything else before we're done? Given that's 9 o'clock, motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Clap second.
Second.
Okay,
Yes.
roll call again.
Pooja, yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Bradley, yes.
Chimara, yes.
Clap yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV.